Welcome to the first lecture of section 2, where I'll be showing you how to set up a texture inside an AI image node. And an AI image node is nothing more than just a read node to get any textures into your render package. So let's first create an AI image node. Hitting tab in my AI image node, and I'm creating that node. So the default interface looks like this on the right. So we have an image name, which is our file input path. And then we have different filtering options. We've got some little color corrections. We have our input color space. And then we have several other attributes. So first of all, let's just load in the texture. And after loading in the texture, let's just create a simple AI flat shader, which is, I will talk about this in more detail, but let's just connect the AI flat, click our plane and just assign the flat shader to the surface. And then you can see we get the texture, which I connected to the AI image node, and we see it in the viewport. So I can actually disable the selection highlighting, so I can select the plane without it being looked like it's being selected, and you can see I can move it and it's rendering on the fly. So this is kind of the basic things you can do with an image node. Obviously, there's a bit more things. You can color correct it using a multiply, for instance, which color corrects the whole image. You can offset the black levels, so you get something more like that. And obviously, you can read up for this on the Arnold website under the documentation tab if you have any more specific questions. You can also manipulate the image based on the UVs. You can assign it to a specific UV set if you have that. You can offset the coordinates. You can offset it in UV range. So if I hit maybe 0.25, we will offset this by 0.5. We will offset this by half of the UV tile. We can do that in U and V direction. The wrapping is just if it's being scaled down or something, how is it being repeated? And the same, you can scale it up, scale it down, squash it. So now you can see it's actually wrapping in U periodically. You can have a black, so it's actually not wrapping. You can mirror it, and you have several options to do that. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that if you want to assign this to a geometry which has a fixed amount of UVs. And these, I think, are self-explanatory, the ones at the bottom to flip and swap and all that. A bit more interesting thing is texture tokens. So let's say you have a big asset which needs to have high resolution, but you need to preserve the texture size. So what you would do, you would go into your painting software, something like Mari or Substance Painter, and you would paint several different UV tiles, and then they are called UDIMs, and then you need to bring them back into your package. And you do that by assigning a specific attribute name to your file input path. So if you're working with UDIMs, what you would need to do is you would need to open the bigger and smaller than brackets and just put in the UDIM tile in here. And Arnold is clever enough to search for UDIM tiles in that range. So it will be looking for tiles starting with 1001, 1002, 1010, and it will automatically fill in the blanks. Obviously, you need to make sure that your file names are correct. So in most cases, there would be a dot in front of this, and now it says it's looking for it, but it cannot find any textures because I don't have any UDIM tiles at that location. And if you use, I think if you use Mudbox, they use a tiling method, so you can do the same thing using tiles instead. And this will go into a U1 underscore V1 file examples. And then you can also do a bit more advanced stuff using shape names or attribute tokens, but I think this is a bit too much for a beginner course, so you can easily read up on that in the documentation on the Arnold documentation site. So one last thing I want to talk about is the mipmap bias. So Arnold likes it if the textures are optimized a lot. So to make Arnold happy, what you would need to do is for each texture input you have, you could go into the Arnold settings menu and go to utilities and open up the TX manager. And you can see it's currently missing files, but we can ignore that. But if I would select the Emily diffuse, I could create a TX file. And this is actually an optimized file format for Arnold, which has several mipmaps based on the distance of the camera. And the mipmap bias is you can actually force a certain mipmap level to render. So you can go up I think up to 9 levels in the positive side. And if you go on negative one, you can actually force it to be a higher quality than it would think it should be. So on 0, it's automatic. So you can say if the automatic algorithm says, hey, this is a mipmap level of 2, and you put in -2, this would actually be the original file texture size. So it will not be mipmapped. If you would go on 3, it will be 3 versions lower than it should be. So this is kind of interesting if you want to work with the mipmap bias thing. What else? You can definitely change your color spaces. So depending what the input is, you would need to change your color space. So for a sRGB image, which you most of the time would get from the internet, you would make sure that the input space is sRGB. I'm loading in a EXR file. Oh, well, my file name is not correct. So I'm loading in an EXR file, which is linear. So I'm not sure if Arnold is clever enough to ignore this stuff for the EXR files, because they are 99% always linear. But let's just switch it up again. And you can see actually if I put it to sRGB, the texture looks totally off because Arnold is double linearizing it. And if I put it back to raw, it's fine. This is how it should look like. So this would sum up the AI image node.